Hello, friends. Welcome to my channel. Friends, today we will look at the principles for data processing under GDPR. Now, under GDPR, data processor refers to an entity that can be anybody, either legal or a natural person, who processes the personal data of data subjects on behalf of data controller. Now, friends, I have dealt with these terminologies in sufficient detail in my previous video, and I will paste a link in the description box for you if you're interested in going through them. They are very simple and easy to understand, and I would encourage you, if you want to understand GDPR, it's important to have a clear understanding of these terminologies. Now, back to our track. Now, data processors have to process the data as per guidelines specified under GDPR. Article 5 of GDPR talks about the 6 accountability principles about how the data must be processed. Let's have a look at these principles. The first principle: the processing of data must be lawful, fair, and transparent to the data subject. Now we can divide this into two parts: lawful, one part, and the second part is fair and transparent. Let's first understand what lawful processing means. Lawful means that the data controller identifies and documents the legal basis for data processing even before any processing activity is started. So, before is very important here. That before any processing happens on the data, the legal basis for data processing is clearly stated and documented. Now, GDPR provides for 6 lawful bases to process the data. Number 1, consent. The data subject must give an explicit consent for the processing of their data and also for a specific purpose. For example, we all shop online nowadays, and lot of times when a company asks us to sign up for their newsletters, we sign up by giving our explicit consent to receive those newsletters. And if you would have observed, the newsletter at the end always mentions that you can unsubscribe from the list at any time. So this is the first lawful basis, consent. Let's look at the second lawful basis that's allowed under GDPR for data processing. Number 2, contractual necessity. Here the processing of data is essential for the performance of contract with data subject. For example, once a customer has done some online shopping, then some part of their data is essential to perform that contract, that is, to send those products to the customer physically. So here the relevant data that would be processed would be the name, the email address, and the physical address of that customer. But what kind of data will not be necessary for the performance of contract? It would be the gender, the age, the nationality. All these things would be absolutely irrelevant for the processing of the data. Number 3, legal obligation. Now here, the data processor has to comply with the legal obligation and hence has to process the data. Number 4, vital interest. Now this is a very strict condition where the data can be processed only to protect the vital interests of data subject. For example, in case of a medical emergency, the healthcare provider, it can be the doctor, the nurse, or the hospital, will need to process the personal data of the patient to provide life-saving treatment. Number 5, public interest. Now here the processing is necessary for performance of an activity that is in larger public interest. Maybe the Ministry of Health processes the personal data of the people to monitor the spread of any new disease or contagious diseases, etc. Or the data controller has an official responsibility to process the data as part of its jurisdiction or authority. For example, processing the personal data to investigate a criminal case. It would fall under the responsibility of the data controller. And the last reason for processing the data legally is legitimate interest. Now here the data controller is allowed to process the data of data subjects for his or her own legitimate interests, but at the same time, GDPR provides that they should uphold the rights and freedoms of data subjects as well. For example, a company needs to process the personal data of its employees to manage them effectively, say their salary slips, their leave applications, etc. But at the same time, they are under an obligation to ensure that the personal data of the employees is protected and protection of rights of the data subjects, that is, the employees here, is paramount. So it talks about a balanced and legitimate reason to process the data, where the one party needs to process the data for legitimate reasons, but at the same time must ensure that the rights and freedoms of the data subjects are also not hindered. So, friends, these were the 6 bases to decide the legality part of the first principle. Now, let's look at the second part of the first principle, that is fair and transparent. The requirement is that the data controllers must ensure transparency with the data subjects as regards the legality of their data processing, why the data is being processed, and how much data would be processed. They should provide the data subject with clear and explicit information about how their data would be processed. Let's come to the second principle, purpose limitation. The data must be processed only for the specific purpose for which it was collected, and that purpose should be told very clearly, explicitly, in plain language to the data subject at the time when the data was collected. The third principle, data minimization. This means that only that much data must be collected as is adequate, relevant, and limited for data processing. This means that only that much data should be collected and processed as would be absolutely necessary for the purpose or for the performance of that purpose for which the data was collected. Number 4, that is the fourth principle, accuracy. It is required that the data is accurate and, where necessary, kept up to date. And any data that is inaccurate must be erased. Fifth principle, storage limitation. This means that the data should be stored in a form which allows identification of data subjects for no longer than is necessary for performing the specified purpose for which the data was collected. But it also provides that storage for longer duration can be allowed in certain cases where such storage is in public interest, or for scientific or historical research purposes, or for statistical purposes, but this has to be read along with Article 89. Article 89 of GDPR deals in great detail about archiving data in public interest or for research purposes. But it also provides a proviso that appropriate safeguards must be maintained so that the data subject's rights and freedoms are protected. It also talks about the pseudonymization of data, which I've covered in the previous video, and the link will be in the description box. And just to revise, pseudonymization means a process where personal data is processed in such a manner that the personal data cannot be attributed or linked to a specific data subject without the use of additional information. Pseudonymous data is considered personal data, and hence GDPR applies to it. On the other hand, anonymization of data is where the data has been changed in such a way that it cannot be linked to the data subject in any possible manner, and then it is not considered personal data, and when anything is not personal data, GDPR does not apply to it. Sixth principle, integrity and confidentiality of data. Data processing must be done in such a way as to ensure appropriate security of personal data. This means that the data must be secured by using technical and organizational measures in such a way, that is, the data should be secured in such a way that no unauthorized, unlawful processing happens on the data. And it also provides that the data must be protected against accidental loss, destruction, or damage. Under Article 5, it also provides for the principle of accountability. That is, the data controller is responsible for being able to demonstrate compliance with all these principles of GDPR. And under GDPR, it is stated that if you cannot show that you are GDPR compliant, then you definitely are not GDPR compliant. So, friends, I hope this video gave you a nice overview and understanding about how the data processors need to process the data, what are the legal principles or the accountability principles which they have to keep in mind while processing the data. Friends, I hope you liked the video. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you soon with another video. Till then, goodbye, take care, and have a great day.